Hey, what's up guys? It's Enigmus and we're back with another video. Today we'll be talking about or breaking down this right here. And this is how the damage works in Diablo 4. I just want to answer a few questions that I've seen popping up recently. And I hear you have problems. You feel a little bit weaker and weaker as you level up and progress through Sanctuary. And I'm going to give you a solution to that today. So what you really need to focus on is the damage multipliers and additives. So the way we understand that is by looking at this list over here. Now, every single critical strike damage over here, which is this yellow, let me highlight this in yellow. So this entire yellow section is called a bucket, and within this bucket we have a modifier of critical strike chance versus injured. By the way, if any of you are wondering what VS stands for, damage VS equals to damage 2. So anything that when you see a damage versus, or let's see damage versus, that just means damage 2. For example, if I go over here, there is an item that has damage to close enemies. Damage to close enemies you will be able to find in the grey bucket. Now in the grey bucket, damage versus close is the same thing as this right here, damage to close enemies. The same thing as damage versus close, because damage verse means damage to. Now that makes sense to you, you will need to understand what you need to do is to multiply the buckets together. So the only way you do that is by having modifiers that are from the separate bucket. Anything within the same bucket is a plus instead of multiplication. So what you really want is to multiply, because we have, for example, a stat here that is critical strike damage, right? We also have critical strike over here in this bucket. So this is not good, because it's only additive, okay? So they just stack on each other. It gives you 26 plus bonus of critical strike damage. Now you might think that's good, but what's better than addition? Multiplication. So what if you had, for example, critical strike damage over here multiplied by, let's say, what do we have here? Critical strike damage with close. So we've got critical strike damage and damage to close. So these guys over here, they multiply, okay? Instead of, for example, let me bring this to yellow so you guys understand. I unfortunately rolled a critical strike damage on the first bucket, and then in the second bucket we've got critical strike damage again. In fact, let me highlight this in purple so it's more understandable. So we've got these two over here, which add together. Okay, so 49% plus 56%. So it just adds together. It stacks with critical strike damage. I don't have anything that will multiply it. If I, for example, rolled this stat into, so I go to the occultist and you can roll your stat. If I roll this stat on, let's say, vulnerable damage, which is by far one of the most important damage aspects you need to be focusing on. So if you can see here, this is a separate bucket, vulnerable damage. So vulnerable damage will times anything outside its bucket. It will times by the gray bucket. It will times by the yellow bucket. It will times by the blue, orange, and the green. Okay, so that's why it's so good. So vulnerable damage, if I had that, this would be an amazing weapon. It would by far crush anything and multiply by everything. So that's what you really need to look out for. The second thing is, I want to point out, is that you really need to look at the aspects that you're imprinting here. Because what you can get is basically a buff on your critical strike. Now I don't have it here, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about here. The aspects is also a global multiplier. In the fact, you have it right here. This is the formula, but you really don't need to know the formula, guys. Let me make this even more simple for you. All you need to focus on, I'm gonna give you this sheet, this little this thing. I'm gonna give you a link in the description. Okay, you can check that out, click on it, and what you really need to focus on is that every single bucket has its own kind of label to it. So this right here, for example, let me make this into yellow. Critical strike, every single critical strike will be in the same bucket. Every single damage versus damage 2 will be in the same bucket. So whenever you see an item and it has damage to crowd controlled, damage to bleeding enemies, you will know that's in the gray bucket. You will know that's a separate bucket from critical strike damage or critical chance, because anything that starts with critical is a different bucket, and that will multiply with it with their own counterparts. So there you go. That's all you need to know. And if everything else goes to shit, just increase your vulnerable damage. I'm pretty sure it's very low, and if you increase that, your damage output will be significantly more. I hope that teach you everything that you need to know. I hope that once you go back and playing in Diablo 4, and this will give you a good insight into what you need to change. If you really have a good item, like you've got a good stack of additives and you've got some multipliers here, what you really want to do is what I said, is that just grab, go to the occultist. If you haven't rolled on the item, you can just roll onto a different item for some gold, a different affix, sorry. And let's say, for example, this weapon is lacking some vulnerable damage, so I would love to have this as vulnerable damage, and I will go to the occultist and roll for that. Bear in mind that costs gold and some RNG, but there you go. That's how you really custom to your own weapons, to your own loot, and this is how you increase your overall damage output. So I think that's about it. I think I've explained that pretty well, but let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you need a better breakdown. This was really just a quick video for those who are wondering right away, for those who do not know what they're doing. I hope I explained it well. So yeah, thank you for watching. Bye bye.